Hey guys, Kevin here with Prometheum Forge, and today we're going to be doing an assembly video for the Protein Smoothie Maker, a new kit available from Prometheum Forge. So let's get started. First thing you're going to do is take all the frames that you received and punch everything out. You can go ahead and start to sort things that kind of look the same, but we'll identify the pieces little by little as we go and show you kind of what goes where. So the first thing we're going to start with is the rotary blade assembly. So I have that one there kind of put together. You can watch me disassemble it right here in reverse order so you can kind of see where we're going with this whole thing. But here we go. So the first thing we're going to start with is the central shaft. Now I use a syringe to control my wood glue application, but you can really use any kind of wood glue. It's all good. It all works. So I'm going to glue the two halves of that shaft together and then start by adding one of the spacers. These round spacers here, and a second spacer on top of that, and a third on top of that. You don't need a ton of glue to hold all those things together, but there you go. So now I'm going to start slotting the blades on there, and there will be two spacers in between each blade. Now I recommend a dry fit before you start gluing things down with all this stuff, kind of the way you saw me do it at the very beginning, because it does take a little fiddling with to get the blades matched up correctly. There's no right or wrong way to do that, but to my eye, the way you'll see it come out here is the most attractive way to arrange those blades. Kind of looks cool with the staggered thing going on. So anyway, there's two spacers in between each blade, and you can see me here just kind of trial and error, and nope, that's not quite right. Not quite right. Hey, there we go. Now everything's lining up. And then there is one spacer underneath that, and a second one at the very, very bottom there. Oh, strike that, just one. And then one more spacer on top. So I would watch that whole thing once or twice. It's not absolutely critical that you get all the spacers correct in their order, but the number has to be right. So yeah, watch that a couple times before you give it a go. Next up, we are assembling the main body of the vat here. So what I'm going to do is punch out the biggest ring that you see, the base part, so the biggest circle, and then the circle with some other extra bits. Now I'm starting to line up the sides of the vat. So those slots that I just kind of highlighted there are going to accept those 90-degree angle pieces. So those need to be lined up, excuse me, the way you see it with what's going on there. Those two pieces will become the stairs, where the stairs glue in. So I'm lining up on the ring, the skinniest ring. There's a spot for a bottommost stair, so you can kind of see me point that out and highlight that. Next up, that side piece will accept the outlet pipe. So that's what those kind of square markings are for. So anyway, now we're going to go ahead and get the ring glued onto the base. The only reason that ring exists is to give you a little bit more alignment for those side pieces. Having two layers of MDF there just kind of gets everything a little bit straighter, which eases assembly and adds strength. Now I'm just adding a dab of glue on both sides of each one of these slots that will accept the sides that kind of go in. And I will start with all the solid sides. So these are all the same. It does not matter where these guys go. And I'm just working my way around the circle. I got to wiggle those just a little bit to get them seated. But as you get the first few, everything kind of lines up and everything will go more easily. Sometimes I'll do one across the circle to really get things lined up, and then everything else just slots in very easily. I'm looking and just kind of testing my alignment as I go. If you have a problem with the alignment, it's great to find it out sooner rather than later. So double check yourself quite often to just make sure that all the slots are lining up. And also to note, the sides have a longer tab and a shorter tab. The longer tab will go down, and you'll know that because that's just kind of where it fits. It's a longer tab. There's two layers of MDF, so you can kind of see how that works. And again, I'm just being really careful to line everything up. The stairs will come off that walkway there, so you can see how I sort of spot where the stair sides need to go that will accept those stair treads. And everywhere there's not something else going on, you just put a blank side in, and then I'll do a quick cleanup around the edges. If anything does end up in the wrong spot, it's not the end of the world. Just kind of backtrack a little bit, take things apart. You should have a little bit of dry time on your wood glue there, so yeah, not the end of the world. One other important thing to note is that the blade assembly must go in before you put the top bit on there, that whole top ring assembly, just because that's how it all fits together. So I'm adding another spacer on top of our shaft there, because you can see that is what keeps it all stable inside there, the proper height. And now just another process of adding glue around that ring. And then we'll have to fiddle this thing on to the sides, fit the top onto the sides. This is one of the, there are a couple fiddly steps of this process, and this is one of them. So just kind of have a little patience, work your way around. I recommend kind of keeping your hand down to exert some pressure on the tabs that you've already successfully fit into their slots, so your work doesn't, go backwards as they kind of pop out as you work your way around. But just have a little bit of patience and get all those things slotted in there, and then it will be good to go. You can also take this opportunity to wipe away some of the excess glue again. I don't have huge problems with excess glue. It tends to dry clear and then paint up, and I never really notice it, so yeah, no issues there. Give everything a spin to make sure that things are aligned properly and you use the right amount of spacers on the shaft there, and then that section is good to go. Next up, we will insert the 90-degree kind of angle pieces here. So just add a little bit of glue, and with these, you will notice that there is a shorter side and a longer side. So if you put it in wrong, it just physically won't fit, so you really can't put it in wrong, I guess I should say. And that takes a little kind of finagling to get that to snap into place. But once it does snap into place, it's all set. It might pop your sides back out for just a moment as you kind of get that thing settled, which is why I do it right now while that glue is still wet. So if it does need to pop off briefly to kind of get those guys in there, you could even put these in beforehand, before you put the top on. You could set these guys in there. That's probably actually the better way to do it. If I was smarter, I'd probably do it like that. But anyway. So once those guys are in there, notice I'm putting another spacer, and I put no glue on the bottom of that spacer. So that's important so things can spin freely. If you do get glue on there, it's cool. Just break it loose as it starts to dry. But again, no glue on the bottom spacer. And now that gear kind of sprocket looking thing goes on the top. And that's the little handle for spinning the blades. So now, of course, the base sections. So these little guys just kind of T-slot together and then slot into their little spots on the bottom. Those, if you are interested, are exactly 62 millimeters tall, which is the exact height of all your plastic terrain, all of your plastic wall terrain that you're picking up from leading manufacturers. That is all 62 millimeters tall. So that's the logic of the height of those guys. So that should bring you up to a perfect wall height, and then all of your, major manufacturer plastic terrain, shall we say, is going to be exactly 127 millimeters tall. So this kit is designed to have that uppermost walkway at that exact height. So if you want to span it with walkways, to the other terrain in your collection, everything should be perfectly compatible. So now those feet go on there. Does not matter which way is up. I just kind of flipped it over to be OCD about it, but yeah, you can just get those feet set on there and then set it up, and that will put enough pressure on to dry properly and dry straight. Next up, we're going to go to the corpse funnel. So this is kind of a tricky little piece because these are some of the few angles in the piece that are not at 90 degrees. So it takes just a little bit of extra glue because the nature of the MDF, it won't meet up at an exact right angle, but it should be plenty strong once everything is dry. So glue on the top and the bottom, and then get these kind of funnel sides set. And this might take a little bit of messing around. Sometimes they kind of fall off, and yep, there you go, down into the blades. Fish them out of there. Get those guys set up, and then cap it off with the square bit. There we go. And even if one falls off, just kind of get that square piece set, and then you can set everything down in there, kind of squish the glue around, add a little bit if you have to. Once again, I've never really had a problem with excess glue being unsightly, so I tend to use a little more as opposed to a little less, just to make sure that things are sturdy and stable. Next up, we're going to do the ladder. If you've had any PF products before, this one should be a pretty familiar process, but I'm just putting a dab of glue on all the pieces where kind of the guard cage goes together. And whoops, getting off camera there just a little bit. Sorry about that. Oh, there we go. We're back. Yeah, so assembling that guard cage for around the ladder. Safety first in the underhive. We can't have people falling off ladders. OSHA would not be cool with that. And then those ladder clips go onto the top. And then this ladder is designed to position in the back of the stairway there, but the walkway there can go anywhere you want to, though, and also you can glue it in or leave it detached, whatever you want. So here we go with the handrails. So this is one of the more tedious parts of the build. So first we'll go with the uprights of the handrails. I think those things are called stanchions. Stanchion? I don't know. Anyway, those are the vertical pieces that will be holding up the handrail. You can put them in place first and then put the glue in the little nooks and crannies. I tend to like to have a little bit of patience, a little bit of forethought, and get the glue placed beforehand, and you'll see how that kind of facilitates getting these handrails in there nice and flat, nice and even. So here we go. So now I'm going to place glue where all these stanchions will fit in there, and they're going to be a little wobbly. Excuse me, a little wiggly, not very well aligned, but that's okay. We're going to line them up as soon as we add the actual horizontal pieces of the handrail. So now for the moment of truth, and kind of wiggle in this handrail here. You might kind of knock some over. This is kind of a pain in the butt, but once you get it all lined up, you can sort of squeeze them into place, and they'll meet up perfectly with all the angles and little kind of cutouts in that handrail there. So, struggle. There we go. And then one more. Kind of repeat the process with the one on the top. And once you get everything neatly seated, it will be plenty strong once it dries up. Feels a little fiddly before it's dry, but then as soon as it is dry, there you go. So now we're assembling the stairs that kind of wrap around the sides. So there's that little kind of gap I alluded to earlier in the ring that you sort of want to make sure is lined up. And these are the outside bits of the staircase. Jury's out as to whether it's easier to put the stair treads in the outside bits first or the inside bits first. Really, it's up to you. But yeah, just get those things kind of lined up and get the stair shoved in there. There's one stair tread that's shaped differently. It kind of has that triangular shape to it. So that's the one that spans the corner. The rest of them that are just rectangular like that are kind of the straight sections, so you can sort of see where the angle happens. That's where that triangular bit, God, I'm graying. Wow. Anyway, that's where the triangular bit kind of goes in. And as with many things in this build, that will feel a little fiddly until it is set, and then it's going to feel awesome. So there go the stairs, just a little bit of visual alignment, kind of getting everything straight there. And then I tend to leave it on its side so it can glue, with gravity kind of pulling things the direction you want them to. Cool, so for a change of pace, let's go to the outlet pipes. So these pipes are coming in two flavors. You have the ones that you see down below that are all congruent, and then the ones that you see above that have a flat side. So sort your pieces like that. The flat side ones will also have a little square hole in them, and we'll see what that's for later. Put them together like puzzle pieces, and then run glue down them. Basically everything that sticks out, everything that's a tab gets glue. So if you puzzle piece them together like that, and then slot them together, it'll work. And then you saw me there just pressing a little bit, applying a little bit of pressure to kind of distribute that glue and get it all nice and spread around and get the join pretty strong. So there you have it. Now you're going to add those square rings to the outside of the pipe, and that kind of breaks up the flat shape and also serves to add a little bit of strength. So set your glue around that line, that guide line that's etched into the piece, and then just kind of slide that guide down until it lines up right about there. Yep, looks great. And then do the same thing on the other piece. The last part for those pipe assemblies will be the valve control, the wheel on that. So pick up the little valve wheel piece, and there's a little shaft that kind of goes with that and a little spacer. So get those things all together and glue it in that square hole that you saw in that pipe. I think I actually don't do that in this video, but you can figure that part out. Next up, the barrels. So with the barrels, you're going to have these octagons, these kind of skinny, delicate looking things, and then the insert pieces. Note, I'm not actually gluing those together the way they're laid out right there. I'm just using the exterior octagon to guide the pieces in because the tabbing is set up slightly different. The tabs are, like the slots are open on this piece right here. So that's why I'm using that octagon to just kind of help get things aligned. The sides of the barrels are going to look a lot like the treads of the stairs, so just try not to confuse those pieces. If you're not clear which one is which, there are more barrel sides. And actually, ultimately, it doesn't make a difference if you use them all the same. You can really use either one, so just make it consistent. Next up is this most delicate looking piece of the barrel. So you saw when I punched that out a moment ago, and now I'm just getting everything lined up and kind of pushed in. And I'm pushing out against that piece, and again, using that octagon to kind of line things up. Well, now these octagons are going to act like sort of the ribs on the barrel, so that one is shooting for the middle. And then the top and the bottom ones, you can either make those flush with the top and the bottom, or you can have them overhanging slightly, which is a look that I like. Just adds another edge, another thing you can pick up with your brush when you're dry brushing and painting. Next up, to join the angled pipe piece here. So I'm putting glue in every one of these recesses. And then we're going to go ahead, and fit those two together. You can kind of see how that works. And now the side elbow pieces, here they come. So those are those semicircular pieces, and those are going to make the sides of the radius turn there. And then we have a living hinge piece. So the first of two living hinge pieces will go inside there. Now I like to let this guy dry first. That living hinge piece is a bit of a spring. It wants to lay flat. So letting this whole assembly dry for half an hour or something first, you'll have an easier time fitting this guy in there, but that's where it's going to go. So let's set that thing aside to dry. Come back to the barrel here. So now I'm going to ring the barrel and do the offsets like I had mentioned just a moment ago. So you can see me kind of with my fingers just putting that down slightly, and a slight overhang to give you that edge. And adding the rib in the middle. And then we'll kind of do the same idea with the top rib. And with the top rib or band going across the middle of the barrel there, that will also give you a lip for the lid of the barrel. So if you have that sticking up slightly, when you place the lid on top, you'll have a bit of a lip that'll kind of settle down into and keep all the pieces a little more organized, a little more together. So don't put that lid on before things are dry, because it'll obviously get glued in there. But there's that. That handle piece is a little fiddly, so I'm using a bit of the lamp there to kind of poke it out. So add some glue and then slot that guy on the lid there, and there you have it. All right. Next up is the, I'm not quite sure what to call this piece. It's kind of the body bucket lifter here thing. So anyway, the big base goes down there. The slightly smaller piece goes on top of that. We got some 90-degree angles to reinforce the sides and kind of hold those things up. When I am installing the sides, just put glue everywhere and squish them down in there. The only thing to note about the sides is that you want them kind of both pointing the same direction, and that meaning will become a little bit more obvious in a second here when we look at everything from the side. But that little kind of notch thing, that cutout, you want that pointed the same way. This is the body bucket right here that we use to get the corpses in the grinder. So when you lay this thing out, just kind of pay attention to the way we're doing it, the way I'm doing it right there in the picture. Now another note, the shafts that come off the sides of the body bucket will utilize a spacer that's a slightly different shape. You'll notice most of those round spacers have a square cut in the middle of them. This one has a rectangle, and that is to give you kind of a stop for the shoulder of that shaft piece. That will make a lot more sense once you actually get to try to do it, but you can see that one that I just picked up, it has that rectangular hole, and that gives you something to glue against and push against when you push that shaft in there. And there you have it. So you can do this assembly reaching into the bucket before you put the rest of it together or after. Really, both ways are fine. If you do it before, it's going to make the next step a little more fiddly. If you do it after, it'll make the next step a little easier, but then that step will be a little more fiddly. So it's kind of sixes by my perception. So anyway, here's the before method. So now I'm going to put glue on all these tabs. Everything that sticks out gets glue. Don't worry, you can't get glue on too many surfaces. It's all on the inside, so it doesn't matter. I like to put a good amount around the curve on the bottom of the bucket. That's where that last living hinge piece is going to go, and that can be a tricky one to get to sit in there, so more glue is your friend. And there we go, there we go. So now assemble the thing together like a puzzle, and once you get all four sides down, it'll be plenty strong, and you can push and kind of make sure that everything is sticking properly. And that guy's just a little delicate, so I tend to set it aside for a few minutes, and we can come back to the pipe and now do that living hinge thing. Here it comes. So kind of squeeze that in there, mess with it a bit till it lines up properly. You'll get the idea. Once things have dried for a little on your bucket there, put in these skids. Those are just for aesthetics. And they are different top to bottom. It really doesn't matter which way is up, which way is down, whatever your eye thinks is better. So now here comes that living hinge piece once things have kind of dried. I guess I did misspeak a minute ago looking at putting the glue where the living hinge will go. I would wait to do that until right now because now the glue is wet and now we're fitting that living hinge piece. So now that thing is set, it won't be a perfect 90-degree angle, so just kind of squish it in there until you're happy with it. Close enough. And now we have the bucket, and I can carefully separate those sides just enough to slide that bucket in there and go ahead and add the spacers to make the whole thing work. So again, I'm not putting any glue in between the spacer and the side. And the very endmost cap is going to be the last of those rectangular pieces. So many of the spacers are square spacers, and then these ones need to be rectangular. So they're pretty close in appearance. So just use a little discretion in which one goes where. So now we're going to glue the top of the body bucket lifter assembly together. There's a couple ways to approach this, but basically you got those 90-degree angle pieces. You got the top piece. So just effort those together. You'll have to bend things just a little. The MDF is forgiving, so you can kind of slot things in, use a little bit of force, bend that in there. Once it snaps into place, it's a very strong connection. So it's slightly awkward to do it, but I like that approach because I just felt like it was stronger in the end. Those pieces aren't very thick, so a little bit of extra strength is welcome right there. So you can see me kind of pressing and twisting and bending just a little bit, but then it snaps in, and you're good to go. You'll want to play with it right away. I recommend let it dry just a bit before you start manipulating the bucket the way you see me doing there. But yeah, the way that's designed is to go up to that kind of stopping point, rotate, and then it can lock into the slot there when it rotates. Next up, we're back with the living hinge here one more time. So yeah, let's get that guy slotted in there, and yeah, there we go. I think in the previous take, I once again broke the pieces apart because they weren't quite dry enough, so that's why that was done in 2 takes there. So then get your outlet pipe fit in, and here's that little bit we were talking about from earlier. Here's the wheel, the valve where we can open the inlet pipe. So you'll see the smallest little spacer, round spacer, goes right there, and that keeps the inlet wheel just a little bit off that pipe once I glue that guy in place. Next up, the stairs. The assembly there was skipped, but you can kind of figure that one out. Put the treads, on the sides of the staircase there, and then that back piece goes on the back of the stairs. That's a freestanding piece. You can kind of clip that thing in a little bit more and glue it in if you care to. I like to sort of leave it freestanding. So that is where that goes. Next up, we're doing the lights. So these lights, these kind of street light looking things are, the pieces are just a little delicate. So use just a little more caution when you're punching out the sides of the lantern. And if you break it, it's cool. It's grimdark, right? But yeah, if you use a little care with those, you can get them out of there with no problem. And now the extra bits that are all kinds of circles with varying holes punched out of them. The first thing I'm going to do is assemble the light stands so you can see those pieces fitting on there, kind of like a clothespin. Now I put a little piece in between them because that is the way that light is going to slide on and off your terrain is by sliding onto a horizontal surface. So I use a scrap piece just to get that spacing correct. So there's another scrap piece just to get the spacing right, and I'm going to kind of squeeze it down there to make sure that it's properly aligned. So now we're going to go ahead and assemble the light. So first, take one of the circles, and it looks like we're doing, yeah, one at a time here. So take the 2 circles that have the squares coming out of them, and there's not really a right or wrong way to do this. You're not going to break it if you do it incorrectly, but this is how I like to do it. So that the biggest piece where the slots are totally encapsulated, that becomes the top of the lantern, and then the bottom of the lantern you can see me installing right now, and that has slots that are open to the sides. So that one's going in, And like I said, I mean, those two can be switched around. It really doesn't matter. I like the light being fatter at the top and tapering towards the bottom, but you can't really do this wrong. So again, just fiddling that piece in there. And then on the bottom goes the circle with the square in it. I'm sorry, it looks like we're doing that on the top for this build. And then on the bottom goes that little kind of dagger. And on the top, there you go, goes that circle with the square in it. And again, there's no wrong way to do that. Whatever looks best to your eye. Those are just decorative elements. So now that the lamp post, if you will, goes on that part, and just let that bad boy dry so you can then stand it up and add it to your terrain. And you have two different options on the lantern. That one obviously clips to a horizontal surface. The smaller one that I finished first would clip into a vertical surface. And you can look at the photos for where I choose to put those, but you can put them wherever you want. And they're included just because they kind of look cool and they add a little depth to the model, a little more height. And you can glue them on, or you can just slide them on. The vertical one really does need to be glued in place, so pick where you want that thing and glue it in there. The horizontal one, you can get away with placing that ad hoc if you choose to. And just kind of lining up the stairs. And I think we're done. Is there anything else? Oh, okay. So I'm going to glue the ladder down in this assembly. And again, you can leave that glued or unglued. That is totally up to you. All right, so that's it for today's assembly video. Head on over to PrometheumForge.com to check out a bunch of other cool products that are going to look great on your tabletop. Another great way to follow us is on social media, mostly Facebook and Instagram, so just search for Prometheum Forge and you will find us there. Thanks a lot for watching today, and hope you enjoy the product.